you?
Okay, welcome again to the biannual NCOR meeting. Now we're having Regina Hurley, professor at SUNY Buffalo, talking about injury ontology.
I mentioned I'll maybe speed through this a little bit because I know we're bumping up against lunch. Ontology in very early beginnings right now. I'll just share a little bit about the thoughts are going, and at the end, if you have thoughts or questions, because it's such an early project, I would certainly be interested to hear them. As maybe intuitive, the injury ontology is something that will be very relevant for like a number of different domains. We've got the sports people who are interested in injuries. We got legal domains are interested in legal injuries. We've got obviously medicine is going to be directly interested in injury, occupational health. There's all sorts of points of interest. But of course, in all of these different domains, we're going to have various definitions of what an injury is, most of which are going to be defining the term injury locally, like in terms of what matters to the people who are defining it. So here's just a couple of different definitions that you can find in the legal. This is going to drive me nuts. Legal world. So says maybe in any harm, whatever caused illegally to a person in body, mind, reputation, or property. So it turns out that if I just fall and hurt my arm, that was not an illegal cause. I'm not injured according to the law, right? This legal definition, because there was no illegality with regards to that event. Here also, we see injury defined as damage to a person's body, an injury that exists so a person cannot physically enjoy his property. Right. Again, we see sort of the ways in which the defining of what an injury is in terms of the things that are going to be of interest to the like injury lawyer himself. Right. It's going to be my client is no longer able to enjoy his speedboat because he's disabled in a number of ways owing to whatever injurious event. Similarly, sports, they have a plethora of injuries definitions, most of which have to do something with like the functioning of a body or the availability of a player, right? They define injury as a loss of bodily function or structure that is the object of observation in clinical examinations. So turns out if you don't get a checkup and you're not, being observed for, whatever the ailment may be, turns out you're not suffering an injury. Likewise, injury is defined, I think this was from FIFA, as any physical or medical condition that causes a player to miss any match time in the regular season or final. So if you're outside of, if your team hasn't made the playoffs and you get really upset and bash your head against the wall, that's not an injury because you've not missed anything outside of the season or anything like that, right? Finally, a slightly better definition, but medical folk are going to be interested in injuries. This is a definition provided by the World Health Organization. So they define an injury as a bodily lesion or at the organic level resulting from acute exposure to energy, which can be mechanical, thermal, electric, chemical, radiant, interacting with the body in amounts or rates that exceed the threshold of physiological tolerance. So it's a little bit less contextualized or especially contextualized to like the legal domain or the sports domain. And yet we still find some issues here, right? They mention only that the lesion, first of all, not all injuries will be lesions, but also they're not going to all result from acute exposure to energy, right? I'm sure many of us, certainly I, have certain injuries that are the result of various cumulative micro traumas, which we'll talk about a little bit later, right? From typing, keeping your wrist at a certain angle, or if you work on an assembly line, right? Turning the screw in a particular way over and over and over again isn't going to be an injury that results from an acute kind of trauma, but rather an accumulation of lower impact traumas. I'll mention also, I think it was Barry who came up with a counterexample, so to speak, for this very common phrase or conceptualization we see with injuries, which is that it is an exposure to energies external that are, coming towards you, so to speak, right? Like having a blunt object, right, forced upon you that then breaks your arm, right? But if we consider cases of frostbite, as being something that can cause injury, and certainly should be. It won't be exactly the environment's energy being thrust upon you, but rather energy of your own body being seeped away, right? Is how it should be conceived of. So just again, pointing to ways in which we need to be very careful about how we understand injury. Likewise, I will here's a kind of a taxonomy of injuries that is used and provided by the Army. Um, it's very helpful in a number of ways. It's also very problematic in a number. I won't go through all of the problems, but just the first one is just a little bit of a logical incoherence, right? We have mechanical energies, non-mechanical energies, and then just a grab bag, which are neither mechanical nor non-mechanical. Um, uh, and this is it's not for bad reasons though. One thing that they do, this chart is actually quite helpful at providing, unlike the other definitions, sort of specifications about the like pattern of energy that is involved in certain energies, right? Like I just mentioned, there's a difference between the pattern of energy that is involved with an acute trauma and the pattern of energy that is the cumulative micro trauma, right? It's not just one blunt force coming upon you, it is many smaller, lower threshold forces. So it's actually quite helpful. Unfortunately, it's less helpful when we think about this as a kind of a coarse grained taxonomy, right? Because we can, of course, have like an acute or maybe an acute trauma that is resulting from poisoning, right? Like if I drink a poison of sorts and then like my internal bladder just starts to uh, fizzle out. That's going to be an acute chemical trauma that won't be able to be represented here, right? Because it seems like all acute traumas are owing to mechanical injuries, and that would not be one. That would be a chemical one, perhaps. Nevertheless, it's very important, right, to identify various ways in which we can have, or the various kind of natures of the energies that can be thrust upon the body when it comes to different injuries, right? So it's important to note, right, like there's some that are owing to temperature differentials, some are owing to chemical differentials, and thermal energies as well. And so it's just another layer of kind of adding kind of ways of distinguishing and classifying injuries. This one's just kind of a grab bag. I think they were maybe just like hoping to capture various contextual facts about like whether the injury was owing to abuse or whether it was an intentional injury thrust upon someone or not. And I think food poisoning is on there. So anyways, room for improvement is all I mean to point out here. Okay, so room for improvement, blank slate. There's kind of a couple of ways we can go, but I'll just kind of introduce the working definition that we have. I would love to hear thoughts on, which is that an injury is a disorder that is constituted by some discontinuity or other unphysiological alteration of the cellular structure of one or more body tissues that exists as a result of some energy differential between the tissue and its environment. A little bit wordy, but we'll go through it. A disorder is simply a material entity which is kind of clinically abnormal and part of an extended organism. This is just from OGMS, the Ontology of Medical Sciences. So this is just a common, it's a material entity, right? The injury itself is the thing that inheres in your arm, perhaps. A discontinuity or other unphysiological alteration. This is something I have questions about. Maybe we can talk about in the Q&A if there's time. Which is simply a discontinuity is relatively intuitive, I would imagine, right? Like if you've broken your, I don't know what that is, a femur bone, there's going to be a discontinuation in the structure of the bone. Unphysiological alteration, I'm not confident I can speak fully to that, what that means yet, but I think one of the ways of trying to cash what that out what that is by imagining a person who's, say, sitting in a wheelchair for, years on end and in a slightly altered, state. And the cells of their spine might start to grow such that on the one side they have more compression and on the other side they have more growth, such that slowly over the course of a long period of time they develop scoliosis, right? There wouldn't necessarily be a discontinuity in their spine, but some sort of alteration of their spine that I think perhaps could count as an injury. And then right, we at the end of it, right, have some energy differential, not again energy like thrust upon one, but some differential between the tissue and its environment, right? And so this is this part in particular is I think going to solve a number of the problems that we just mentioned, right? Like the one with the frostbite. This is going to solve one of the issues that have to do with ways the ways we can describe different injuries is by describing the different features of the energy differential that caused them, right? So one of the features is going to be the kind of energy, the type of energy source. Was it the energy from the sun? Was it the energy from the soccer ball hitting your head? Was it the energy from listening to your music too loud, right? All sorts of kinds of energy sources that could be described differently. And then we could, sort injuries in that regard, in that way. Likewise, we can also describe different energy differentials in terms of the pattern of the energy, right? Was it just this image here is meant to depict an acute injury, right? Here we have like the tissue, a representation of like the tissue's tolerance for force thrust upon it. And the magnitude at which like this is what it can tolerate forces up to this point prior to breaching or something like that. And then, like just pressing on your arm is not going to cause any sort of injury of sorts. But taking a knife to it certainly would. That would exceed the threshold that the tissue could tolerate. So that would be an acute kind of trauma. This one up here, oh, it's the wrong image. Here's a depiction of the of what might be called like a sustained forced injury. So imagine yourself kneeling or something like that, right? After a certain amount of time, the tissue of your kneecap is going to give way. If you're kneeling for, maybe hours, weeks, months, you can imagine the tissue tolerance is going to slowly go down as the force is continuously applied. The cumulative micro trauma image was supposed to be one in which these smaller spikes over and over and over and over again do this very same thing, which is to reduce the tissue's tolerance to force. And so anyways, this is supposed to leave room for various descriptions of like the pattern of energy that would be causing injury. And then finally, as we were talking about, particularly with, you're not able to enjoy your stuff anymore, or you're not able to participate in the game anymore, owing to injury, those could be considered sequelae of the injury. And so after, we don't want to mistake the results of having an injury with what the injury itself is. And so we can just create a term or a space in the ontology for describing what happens owing to this energy differential, which is constitutive of the injury itself. So just briefly here, we have kind of like a basic modeling of what kind of a sequence of events, so to speak, pertaining to injury. So we have an injurious event, for example, a motor vehicle collision, which causes an injury which inheres in like the neck or vertebrae of some kind, which then further causes, the immediate injury sequelae, which may be pain or a restricted ability, right? Mobility. You can't move your arms, you can't move your neck in the same way that you otherwise could. And then I'm not quite sure what the relation here would be. I think it's actually quite more complicated than it's not directly only caused by like the immediate sequelae, but post-injury sequelae, right? After we are injured and perhaps we've gone through some sort of process of healing, we may have acquired new features or properties, or we may engage in new processes. Like we might have scar tissue now. We might have a new gait. We might walk differently now. We have perhaps owing to a number of those things, walking differently might have you you might have an increased risk for a secondary injury, right? Owing to your awkward gait, maybe you're susceptible to falls, perhaps at a higher rate. You might have a healed fracture. So that's kind of just the basics of what maybe like a series of events would look like. This is just a note, perhaps, like one thing we can do also is by looking at a number of the anatomy ontology, perhaps there's a bunch of work on anatomy that I've been looking at, and we could perhaps just import a number of those terms and create injuries for each of those, right? We have the temporal mandible joint. We could have a TMD injury. We could have the femur, which is this one, a femur injury, right? It'd be very simple and actually quite easy to do that process. We are over now. So this is just a basic depiction that is probably too small for you all to see of some of the ways the various terms I've mentioned and others that I didn't mention would relate to one another in a potential injury ontology, but happy to take any questions if we have time. And then
One from the audience already. Jonathan Laida asks whether injury is a folk class, basically. It's not really a universal, it's still a way of collecting things. And the universe. Why you
I mean, I'm not of sort. It's the are going to be considered injuries in some contexts that perhaps would other contexts. And so there's some evidence to suggest that it's like a folk term of sorts. Nevertheless, I think it's very useful, and it's certainly one that's used widely across various domains. I don't know if they can hear me. Can they hear me? I hope they okay.
Yep.
So for that reason, I feel like it's something that's worth doing some real ontological thinking about.
So I saw two components of your, let's say, definition or working.
Yeah, do you want to go back to it?
Where, say, so you talk about, of course, energy and maybe chemical reactions, poison, and all those teleological components. So are supposed to be in a certain way. You have a body, you should have 5 fingers. If you cut a finger, you're born without a finger. That's bad. That's not, let's say, natural. You're supposed to have these and these parameters, like these blood, like you die.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of talk about the physical reactions. What about like the teleological one? Because it seems you want to combine these two things. For example, I'll give you an example. I have a rock. For natural causes, something falls out. It just split in two.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, there is no way the rock is supposed to be. It's just it's broken, but it's not injured.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be injured because it doesn't have a cellular structure.
Okay.
So that would be one point. The teleological. So I think maybe I'm not understanding the question exactly, but one thing is that the injuries are going to be associated in very common cases with like loss of function, perhaps, right? Thumb, you're not going to be able to shoot the ball as well, or you're away for the time, or you're reduced in some capacity or other. So
arguably, a rock doesn't have any function.
Arguably,
maybe it has a use, but doesn't.
Yeah.
Can I say something? So I think the army approach is illustrative here. There are 2 ways in which your warfighters can be hampered in the execution of their duty. One is disease and things like that, and the other is injury. And there are 2 groups then within the army community who are responsible for minimizing both of those. One group are doctors, the other group are the people who try and work out how to lessen the amount of injury in the military service. Very dichotomy, which is used everywhere, automatically. And if it's a folk, if the injury type is a folk type, I think that's not a big problem because it's a very useful type in all kinds of contexts. As you'll find out when you have a car crash and have to have lawyers who try and get compensation for your injury, which you will have to document very, very clearly.
I hope to get to know that, but just theoretically.
Theoretically, I hope so as well. Yeah. Oh yeah, Finn, sorry.
Thank you. This seems like a really, really fun project. One question I have, so the parent for this is disorder from OGMS. OGMS has an injury class, but they define it a different way. I was wondering the plan for to like advocate for them to change their definition to match what you're thinking, and that just extend from there.
Do they have a class just injury?
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's,
I've been arguing against it.
Yes.
yeah,
But we're
I
going to start.
don't think it's not classified as a disorder.
Underneath disorder.
Oh,
but
is
so
it?
There's 8 subclasses of disorder that I'm seeing here right now. One of them is injury. Definition is different. I was just curious if
Yeah.
the plan would be
Yeah,
to change and then extend from there.
Ideally.
It's a distinct term with its own IP.
no, I think the point would be, I wouldn't want to have two of
Yeah.
them, yeah.
So one of the origins of this work on the ontology of injury was the desire to improve the Ogham's treatment of injury.
Okay.
And injury.
I'd be curious, yeah.
Ogham's has been moribund for a couple of years, but we are reawakening it.
Yeah, actually, we're working with Matthew Dealer
Yeah,
right now to improve some things.
Yeah. but Matthew keeps telling me that they're going to be regular meetings again.
And he's so busy, he's
Yeah.
got so many other projects
Yeah.
going on, but.
Is it related to injury or,
OUMS.
So, I mean, for a different project, we needed, some kind of ontology class to represent patient-reported outcomes.
yeah,
And, since we're doing some work with, dental like, related.
Yeah.
That type.
You were looking
But
at.
there's a whole lot of things I want to change in Ogham's, including like the definition of syndrome, which is.
yeah.
I agree.
You were looking at Bicorner, right? I don't think it's updated, so you should look at the.
I was looking at OLS.
I don't think.
I can double check what their actual, what it looks like if I pull up there.
Any other questions?
So there can't
Oh,
be
yeah.
a mental injury?
Yeah, so that's a good point. There's all sorts of and certainly I think the legal people are going to be interested in, right? I think even just the initial definition of legal included of mind and body. And I think it would be important to eventually have some sort of distinction between maybe the canonical physical injuries that we're discussing and typing right now, and maybe the mental injuries, because that's certainly the case. And if we want to call it injury, we're gonna have to talk out, how to, disseminate labels and whatnot. But I do think absolutely there should be room for that kind of thing. So if that answers your question.
So I think you also have to be careful because, like in regard to the brain, they don't talk as much about injury many times as like lesions,
Yeah,
right? In Alzheimer's or multiple sclerosis.
yeah.
I mean, there are certainly acute brain injury, right?
Mhm.
Some that, because of changes in behavior or,
Yeah.
responses on neuropsychological testing. And they may not immediately have visible, I mean, many times they do, but many times you can't necessarily spot physical damage and behavior that must have occurred. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I would think a lesion is a kind of injury, or it's a way of describing a certain kind of injury. No, do you disagree?
I don't necessarily disagree, but Alex beside me is an expert on.
Are all lesions injuries or no?
What you want to call an injury, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know, sorry to not.
yeah, that's all right.
Answer.
No, that's all right.
I would kind of lean towards some being injuries. I would think.
Some will be greater and worse, and some will be not noticeable initially.
Yeah.
Like protein misfolding. Like it could be, right? There's all sorts of other things.
Yeah, I think it really depends on where, how the lesion comes about. And a lot of time, I mean, a lot of the work that I do is in multiple sclerosis. A lot of the time when you look at someone's brain with multiple sclerosis, you'll see a lot of very clear lesions. You can very easily delineate what is the injured tissue and what isn't. A lot of the time, though, it's much more diffuse. You'll have what they'll call like dirty appearing white matter. And so those, that's where you have a lot of either like inflammatory activity kind of leaking out throughout the white matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's kind of a gradient there of saying, okay, is this injured tissue or not? Like, what do you say is the lesion that's driving the disability or whatever you're looking at? So, like I said, hard to say. I will lean towards it being injury. It's just kind of hard to draw the line.
No, it's tricky because these lesions, they don't happen all at once. They're happening over a longer time period.
Yeah.
Right, and there are also natural changes in the brain as we age. Right?
Yeah.
And so, that's not necessarily injury, but it's a change that may have an effect on the function of the brain.
Yeah, this was a puzzling a thing we puzzled about a little bit, which is whether we've mistakenly captured aging. I think it would be a mistake to capture aging as an injury. And so describing, I guess, the natural processes of aging involve energy differentials of sorts, but perhaps that's, I was just wondering if, I would just have to talk to a subject matter expert about aging and what those processes look like, and whether that would ultimately classify as like the maximal, like cumulative micro trauma over the course of your whole life, right? Like slowly and surely the energy differentials are acting upon your cells. So I don't know.
I mean, we should be careful pushing that too hard. Energy differential.
Yeah.
But,
I'd be curious if you have a specific concern or if it's just related to the aging point.
well, I mean, so like, it's natural over time that the telomeres at the end of our chromosomes
Yeah.
decrease in size.
Yeah.
That's not caused by an energy differential.
Yeah. So that, right.
And for the most part, most people who live a natural lifespan, that doesn't necessarily a major role in their health. But there can be cases where it may lead to damage in certain cells, certain tissues that could be deleterious to the function.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And certainly that is the case. Like, I mean, not all of the, like, I'm imagining reducing, if aging can be reduced to the shortening of telomeres, which I'm sure it cannot, but like, so, let's say something of the sort, then it wouldn't be an injury on this definition, insofar as the telomeres shrinking over time isn't owing to like an energy differential between the cells and its environment, right? Like that's just the cell's natural process.
Well, yeah, because many cell types with each division, there's potential shortening of the telomeres.
Yeah.
And so the cells that have to divide a lot during the course of lifetime, like
Yeah.
behavior-predict stem cells that drive the production of immune cell types, they may be more prone to throw off problems later on as the stem cells themselves have failed to maintain the telomeres.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of variation in individuals too, so.
Yeah. Have we not assuaged your concern about the energy differential? It seems like aging was the main concern, but have we taken care of that?
Well,
Yeah, of course. It's just because it's so early in its infancy. I always want more feedback.
all right. Well,
I guess how does it work with other things like deprivations or blocking of neurochemicals or these kinds of like the protein misfolding? There's all these other
Yeah.
pathways that lead to maybe the answer is it's really just aren't there's not injuries we don't want to be. I mean, aging is clearly disease.
Yeah.
Right now, die. But sorry, it's not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the whole conversation, right? Is aging a disease?
That was the basis of the problem with the term injury. So can the molecule be
I mean, you can't get a long DNA strand that's composing a chromosome can't be inserted.
it still seems to me intuitive that it cannot, it's something else that's going on at that level.
Yeah.
But it's an argument, it's very.
Damage. It
Definitive
can endure damage.
Cells, repair systems that constantly go on to fix broken DNA, and it's more dangerous to their cells.
Yeah, so one, I don't want to get into this argument, it's really a very big one, but one idea is that it sounds odd in English to say that I I injured my DNA yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But that sounds less silly to say I damaged my DNA
Mm-hmm.
somehow.
Yeah, in the sun, my sunburn damaged the
Yeah.
DNA of my cells.
Damage is not the same as injury.
Well, it sounds different in English, so in English there must be a difference there.
Might be a superclass, so you have a screwdriver that has a function, and even if it doesn't repairing, let's say, some function, it can be damaged.
But it can't be injured.
It cannot be injured, because maybe just organisms, maybe DNA is not an organism, so you cannot injure DNA.
All right, I mean, I think, we use the word injury and damage in similar ways, but we apply them to different classes of entities.
Exactly.
That sounds right, yeah.
Might not necessarily be exactly related to organism level, so you can talk about cells of your body that they themselves aren't organisms, but they can be injured.
So I appreciate that you took out there's nothing in here that says that this injury, inhibits your ability to do things or otherwise. Which I like because it's problematic putting those kinds of things in definitions.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, not having that in there is going to lead more to these kinds of conversations where people say, well, what's an injury? What isn't? And I don't like that, calling that an injury. Because then people are, I think, leaning on the intuition that an injury has to be something that's, you're like, oh, are you injured, or do you just, did it hurt and you fell down? Like, oh, get back up and keep playing, kind of thing, right? Injury, you're out. Hurt, well, right? Whereas this is, right? So there's going to be those competing intuitions, and you're going to have to identify with people are swayed by or like pulling those in without even realizing.
Yeah, so the canonical cases of injury are always or typically involve a loss of function of some kind, right? Like you sprain your neck and you can no longer turn your neck, right? You've lost that function or something like that. So I think that's going to be the easiest case where we're all going to agree that like the person who endured the car accident is injured and owing to the loss of function, we can like manifestly say, look they've lost, their tissue must be damaged or something like that. You're right that the more minimal, we'll say, the discontinuity or alteration of the cellular structure is, the less intuitive it is to call an injury of sorts. But I think maybe one way to kind of look, I think if we really press the intuitions, try to frame it in terms of like these micro traumas, for instance, I think we'll start to see why it's important to classify them as injuries nonetheless, without necessarily being able to point to like a large loss of function, right? Like I could still type very well, even if I have like a little bit of carpal tunnel or something like that, right? Even if my tissue is a little bit dismembered. And you're always gonna have, right, like the problem of like, okay, like, well, what if just one cell is got the damage to it or something like that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that with right, I'm cutting up vegetables for dinner, and then I slice off a part of my fingertip. Well,
Yeah.
I slice off one cell exactly somehow.
Yeah, and that's always right.
It is discontinuity by application of force. If I slice off my entire fingertip and I'm bleeding all over the place, right? Clearly, nobody has it.
I guess one thing to
That you're always shedding cells.
Exactly.
but these aren't, you have to remember that this is under the class of disorder, which is classified as clinically abnormal. So like, does the single cell that you've shed by virtue of cutting your vegetables, does that qualify you for being subsumed under the class of like some sort of clinical abnormality? No.
Some things are meant to be broken. Imagine also not in the life sciences, you are in a Mexican fiesta and there's a piñata, you should break it. This is function. And also maybe shedding some cells is good for you because they should not be there.
Can I jump into the queue, please?
We have grumbling tummies. I don't know if yeah, yeah, right. Oh, Finn, I'm sorry.
I have a lot of questions that I could ask. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But
we can always chat more.
Yeah.
So you ask one or two if you want. I would love to. I've been to one and only one, so I would be excited to come to more though.
One of the things I was wondering, is this project already at a stage where you have like data sets already in mind?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We do have, at least Richard Orbach has,
So we need to clarify, can you tell us about your pain ontology?
Will later.
Okay, well, is Bill Duncan involved?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to try and bring about a situation in which there is more awareness in different parts of NCOR about what the other parts of NCOR are doing.
And that's what I'm here.
Yeah, good.
But I'll talk about it later. Because we're gonna eat soon.
yeah, I think
Oh,
so.
yeah, so if this presentation
Yeah.
presented, there are no other questions from the audience.